describing itself as a turn-based, mouse-bouncing puzzle RPG where you destroy massive monsters, Beastbreaker is odd, but really overlooked. It's definitely the most interesting mix of genres I've looked at in a video so far. The outlandish concept was enough to sell me out of pure interest, and Vodeo games have created something I've been very excited to talk about. Not just because of how I feel about the game, but also Vodeo themselves. The game begins by showing this enormous beast looming over a house where Skipper, our adorable mouse protagonist, is hiding. They receive a message crying for help as the beast has cornered someone, and without help they won't survive. Upon hearing this, Skipper rashly decides to take up arms with their grandmother's old sword and charges towards the danger where you take control. Gameplay is pretty simple and easy to understand at first, but has a surprising amount of depth and room for experimentation as you progress. The goal is to break the beast's vital core. You select a move, carefully aim, then go! Skipper will move a set distance, ricocheting off of everything with movement like in a accelerating pool ball. And if you make contact, it takes damage. Every bounce in your basic attack increases your charge, which can be spent on more powerful moves. Once the vital core explodes, the beast will explode, and you win. This is the solid foundation that the game builds upon to create something that's really addictive later on. The beasts are extremely dangerous creatures as told throughout the story and shown with the gameplay, as they'll launch massive attacks directly at you every turn. Since you're a small little mouse against these giant mosaic behemoths, you're likely to die within 2 to 4 hits, so a lot of thought needs to be put in how you'll bounce around to deal as much damage as possible, whilst predicting where Skipper will stop moving to prevent taking damage. Is it worth the risk to attack a vital core that's in a pink zone and try to aim and maneuver it so Skipper stops outside of it, or maybe I should use the turn in a safer but slower way? Through the advice from their grandma and Skipper's recklessness, they manage to take down the beast. Skipper receives more of these mysterious messages from villages in danger of being destroyed by these rampaging beasts. While quiet, Skipper has a heart of gold and immediately takes action again, much to Granny's dismay as she understandably doesn't trust these cryptic messages that came out of nowhere. Fighting beasts is clearly nostalgic to her, but also an uncomfortable topic for some reason. While she won't fight, she'll support Skipper as they travel village to village, breaking beasts, meeting new characters, and discovering what actually happened to the world. I think the fairly quick introduction to the story is great. It introduces you to the setting, the beasts, and most importantly, it gets you asking questions. What are the intentions behind the mysterious character delivering the messages to Skipper? Why are the beasts destroying the world like that? Is there a reason why Granny has a sense of nostalgia but also sadness when seeing Skipper do their thing? Skipper's quest to stop the beasts rampaging through villages is also incorporated into the gameplay through the rampage timer. It ticks down after every turn, and there usually isn't enough time to just break the vital core and end the fight before it hits 0, which will trigger a game over. So how do you stop this from happening? Well, there's 2 ways. The main way is by breaking cores. While the vital core represents the beast's life, the other cores represent things like the various limbs, appendages, or claws. Breaking one will reset the rampage timer, giving you more time to damage more cores. The big thing is that the body part it represents will be destroyed. Is a beast like Crab trying to poke you with a massive pincer? Break the core and it can snip you no more. Fuck, why did I write that? Cancel attacks, remove attacks, clear the way for easier aim. It's fun, it adds a lot of strategy to the game as you need to think about any annoying body parts you can just smash and remove, and whether you can destroy it within the time limit. And because of that time limit, you gotta think about maybe bouncing back and forth to score multiple hits in one turn. You gotta really think about it. They're usually surrounded by scales, which you need to damage to get through them and actually hit the cores. They regenerate every turn, so you need to aim well and make smart use of your moves to not waste too many actions removing the scales. You are on a timer and it goes 0, you're fucked. While you could break just 1 or 2 cores to buy time and focus only on the vital core to win, you are rewarded for breaking lots of cores. You may have noticed these colorful motes that fly out of cores when destroyed. These land randomly near the core, disappear within 3 turns, and you need to get pretty close to pick them up, with the white circle showing the range of it. You collect 4 of the same color and you get a spark, a valuable crafting material in the gameplay, and a source of magic/energy in the story. The urge to pick them up within the time limit creates fun situations which you might want to take a risky shot and bounce Skipper in such a way that you collect tons in one go, the risks being the ever-present rampage timer forcing you to, do something and break all the cores, the beast's attack, and landing in awkward-to-aim places. At its basic core, Beastbreaker is tightly designed. Yes, it's just picking a move, aiming, and going, but there's like so many intertwining systems pushing you towards making these thought-provoking decisions, and timers forcing you to play smartly, with satisfying rewards going to those who master this challenging balancing act the game's always trying to get you to do. Mix all of that with some satisfying sound effects and you got something that is really fun to play. There's far more to the gameplay than just this, but they're linked to other parts of the game, which can be split up into 3 sections. There's the beast breaking stuff, which I just covered, which is the main focus of the game, but there's also the preparation and gearing up you do at home. Sparks can be spent to craft new weapons and armor, which really helps to shake up the gameplay to stop it from becoming too repetitive. Skipper's eventually able to wield 4 unique weapon types that all get you to think differently about how you should take down the beast. There's the sword and shield, which I've been using in explanations up to this point, as it's definitely the easiest to understand, which is why you start with it. I think trying to talk about the other weapon types whilst also trying to break down why the core gameplay works so well would have made your brain explode, or maybe it already has. Sorry, it's a very rambly video, but I really want to talk about everything here. Since this weapon type will have you dangerously bouncing all over the place more than the others, you'll usually have some shield moves too. One will generate block, which acts as another form of health, so you can take some risks without being punished too badly with some foresight. The other generally makes use of block in some really interesting ways. My favorite being a move that reflects the damage you take back to the core that hit you. By building up tons and tons of block, you can safely use this to just delete a beast's body part to leave it with just weak attacks. It's a high cost move, so it does take a lot of effort to really abuse this, but it is really satisfying to do. There's the hammer, which was my favorite for a large portion of the game due to their unique inertia stat. By repeatedly using the same move, this increases and can dramatically boost the power or range of that move to destroy beasts. All the good moves do eat up charge, and this is built up by using your basic attack to travel as far as possible, as the further you travel, the more charge you get, but if you hit a wall, you just stop. You lose a stack of inertia when other moves are used, so it's not easy to stay at full power. My favorite move, though, was one where each stack of inertia would cause an extra hit. You mix that with some damage boosts, which you can get lots of later on, and honestly, it felt a bit busted, because you could just end fights in 2 turns, but can't deny, it was really fun. The throwing knives are unlocked quite late into the game, but became my go-to weapon for obliterating enemies. Unlike the melee weapons, which can do 2 attacks within 1 turn, the range types are only restricted by whether or not you have the resources to just do an attack, like needing to pick up the knives you've thrown to use that ability again, or needing to spend charge to move so you can pick up said knives. However, the basic throwing knife will generate 1 charge for every time it ricochets, which, if you throw it and it bounces 10 times, gives you enough to pick up the knife again, then you can throw it again, which generates enough to move again, and then you get the point about how ridiculous this can get. Pulling off ridiculously long turns by aiming in tight areas or through creative strategies is satisfying, if not hilariously overpowered sometimes. I mean, I managed to beat the final boss in 1 turn with it, which maybe explains why it's unlocked so late, and also why the other ranged weapon unlocked early on feels like it lacks the big numbers compared to everything else. The bow and arrow is quite interesting, and I eventually really enjoyed using it. The sword and hammer, though, were just too satisfying and fun to use early on compared to it. You regenerate some charge every turn and can spend it to move and gain some arrows, though it's really hard to land exactly where you want to be. All attacks use arrows, with the most powerful ones using arrows and charge, but leftover ammo will be converted into charge when you end your turn. It's a lot, but it's all about managing your resources and planning ahead so you can dish out lots of attacks once you're in the right situation or in the right spot. But with the timer, it's hard to get a perfect turn, so you've got to improvise a lot because shit's gonna go wrong. which is cool. Okay, no, I'm obsessed about how the constant threat of the rampage timer really makes the whole game work. Like, it's such a little thing, but it pushes you towards playing aggressively and makes every decision so much more meaningful. At the same time, it's not so strict to the point of being annoying, since there's ways to work around it. More on that later. The bow does allow for some really creative and unique strategies due to it having weirder attacks compared to the other weapons. And honestly, at first I thought it was a bit shit, which is why I really didn't like the bow for quite a while, because some of the early ones seemed a bit wonky. Like, why would I want to have a 20% chance to do 1 damage when I can just use a hammer and hit 5 times and deal like 15? But after I messed around with it, it feels really tactical with all the useful status effects it can easily apply, which is great because, yeah, it takes a lot of work to deal big damage, but the ways you can are really fun on certain bows. It has my favorite attack in the whole game, Fusion Slug. It fires all of your ammo at once to deal a single massive hit. 1 arrow, 1 damage. By making smart use of consumables and your companion's abilities to regain charge mid-turn, so you can keep getting more and more ammo, you can deal triple-digit damage in a game where health never surpasses double. It's so stupid, but it's worth doing just to see the game freak out for a second. Throughout Skipper's adventure, you'll meet a cast of lovable characters that'll help them out in the story, but also assist you during gameplay. You can select up to 3 of them, depending on how much you've progressed, with all having a unique battle ability. This is the second way to reset the rampage timer. Whenever it hits 0, they'll activate their ability, giving you extra time and a helping hand, doing a lot of damage, or giving you a buff, or other stuff, really. I like how they combine the story and the gameplay together here, as the side quests where you get to know that companion better and they go through some neat character development will upgrade their ability to be insanely useful. So useful that I found myself deliberately letting the timer hit 0 to activate them. Yeah, it's a bit risky, because you'll have less room for error afterwards, but, you know, sometimes that doesn't even matter. Because one of those abilities that I absolutely love throws lots of sticky knives that will max out your charge when you pick them up. I mentioned that ranged weapon turns are only limited by charge. You put those 2 facts together, you break the game in half. I did it sometimes because it's fun to just mess around with the weapons I didn't like at first. Even on like the melee weapons, it just opens up so many new dumb strats, and it's why I really love the companions in this game. They also have a tracking ability which is useful in the third part of the gameplay, the scouting. You start off here at this little village you're trying to defend. The beast is somewhere on the map, but you don't know where. You can click to move anywhere to clear up the obscured map to find the beast, who will be traveling 1 tile at a time. Standing next to it will reveal what status effects it's weak to and what stats it might have. If you land on the same space as the beast, you can start the fight with a free turn, but if it moves on to you, it can force a fight. So why would you want to avoid fighting immediately? That's because the map is littered with materials, and these are spent at the village to get items that can buff your basic attack, or just regular consumables. My greatest mistake early on was not making proper use of the usable items, because they can restore charge, there's grapple hooks to reposition to get exactly where you want to be, or the unbelievably helpful status effect items, which can all restrict the beast in some way, and permanently lower one of their stats. Oh my god, I cannot state how fucking useful this is later on in the game, when things can get pretty hard, and sometimes they have ridiculously high stats. There is stun to stop attacks and keep them in place, taunt to pause the rampage timer, or scar to prevent scales from generating. Especially scar, that one is so fucking helpful in so many fights. Those items function differently area to area, but they all fill up a bar for every core hit, and then the effect is applied when the bar is full. Every enemy can be affected by these, and their resistances and weaknesses only affect how big the bar will be. While standing next to the beast is really risky, the information will help you figure out what status would be most helpful. Being able to restrict the beast's actions or turn down stats to make them really low makes the harder fights feel really fair, as you always have the option of just removing anything you may think is annoying. It turns "this fight is frustrating" into "my fault, I should have inflicted scar." However, you aren't the only one who can buff themselves when scouting, because the beast will travel to specific spots to increase their own stats. In later areas, this becomes a real concern, and if it fully powers up, it will move towards the village, which is an instant loss if it lands there. Even if you stop it and get into a fight, you're gonna have to deal with something really challenging. It's a neat bit of risk and reward. You want to buy the items you want in as little moves as possible so it doesn't buff itself too much, but going too fast into the obscured map runs the risk of getting ambushed unprepared. So, the tracking abilities help to lower that risk by revealing parts of the map, collecting materials from afar, or removing really annoying buff spots. Beastbreaker has a lot going on in its gameplay, though it's never overwhelming as everything is unlocked at a nice pace. There was one point in the game, though, where I felt really burned out, as the repetition really hit and I just took a break for a few days and came back to it. It's very focused on doing one thing, and I respect it, as the unique gameplay is absolutely solid, and stays pretty fun for the 20 to 30 hours it takes to beat, if you try out lots of weapons and different strategies. I love the hammer that hits and does like 15 damage in one attack. Don't use it for so long that it gets really boring, because I'm pretty sure that's the mistake I made. The game does reward you for using weapons you haven't used before, so try using weapons that aren't the strongest to mix it up a bit. There's a decent amount of what feels like padding in the main story, where you're like forced to do some random missions and find clues in the scouting section in order to progress. While sometimes it is a bit annoying, there's usually at least some interesting story going on when searching for clues. It's not like it grinds to a complete halt. I didn't mind it at all later on, because I just used it as time to really experiment with the gameplay, especially when you're able to make custom weapons. It's just the top or bottom rows of pre-existing weapons at first, but many hours in, you can mix and match all 4 moves to create your own weapon, with some of them being new moves, I think. The amount of freedom given to you in Beastbreaker is what got me absolutely loving the gameplay in the second half of the game. While the game pushes you to do so, if you don't find satisfaction in coming up with funky strategies or experimenting with custom weapons that are outside of your comfort zone, or to put it simply, if you aren't a big nerd, then I think Beastbreaker could feel a little bit too long or like padded out or tiring. You will fight beasts you fought before fairly often, so it might be better to play over many short sessions instead of long binges. But with how the gameplay loop works, it's perfect to just pick up and play. I mean, I was getting pretty tired of it until the custom weapons were unlocked, and past that point, I just kept going and going and going. I mean, I love that kind of stuff in games, but for those who don't or didn't progress far enough to really mess around with the game with the custom weapons and stuff, I think it's fair if they really don't end up liking Beastbreaker. Though, I don't think that will really apply to you because you've gotten this far in a video rambling about a game that you've likely never heard about, so yeah. Of course, there's more to video games than just gameplay that can be just as important to making the whole experience work. If I'm going to be looking and listening to something for hours on end, it better be good, and Beastbreaker absolutely delivers in the presentation. The music is done by Big Giant Circles. Just like the game's role, which just seems like a medieval fantasy setting at first, but is revealed to have bits of modern technology, the soundtrack makes use of many instruments, but also combines it with the more, like, electronic and synthesized elements to make something really unique. I don't know if that's the exact terminology, I'm still not good at describing music stuff. The music is excellent, but it's how well it's integrated into the game that elevates it to amazing for me. Like, during the scouting sections, it's tense, but with the classical instruments being at the front and center, with maybe hints of the more electronic stuff. Once the fight starts, it will smoothly transition into one of 3 higher energy versions of the song, with the electronic stuff becoming more obvious. It fits really well since the beasts look really out of place and could be cheeky foreshadowing as well, but I'll get to that when I cover some spoilers. My favorite example of this is in Skipper's Home. It has 4 sections you can look at with the music using the same trick. Initially, it's calm but somber. The beasts have left the world in an apocalyptic state, whole cultures destroyed, people hide in fear, separated and in danger, but when Skipper finds more companions on their journey and they start to really make a difference, more and more instruments are added to the songs with every companion that joins to make it into something that is more upbeat. It might be a small detail, but one that really helps to establish the tone. I could say establish there, fuck. Speaking of the companions, they all have really strong designs, and the art style overall is very charming. Even just from looking at them, I'm sure you could accurately guess their personality, which is great. While I wasn't really sold on the writing at first, I mean, I thought it was just good, I grew to like and genuinely care about all of them. Despite the large cast of characters, they all get a good amount of development throughout the main story, and especially in the personal side quests, which are really good. You absolutely must do them if you play the game. The character writing absolutely carries the story, as I didn't really think much actually happens until the final section. All the characters have been negatively affected by the beasts and the state of the world in a variety of ways and dealt with it differently, like depending on their background or perspective. Because of this, you actually end up learning a ton about the world and the culture through the interactions between the characters, as well as just, getting to know them better, which is why I think the writing's fantastic and gets better and better as the game goes on. There's always some new conversations to read every time you go home, and the different companions you take on quests will talk to Skipper or another companion. With how different each character's personality and worldview is, sometimes they can clash with arguments or start to doubt themselves, or can just lead to some really funny dialogue, especially once you've met every character. Not everyone lives in a rustic cottage like Skipper. There's Dandy, linked to royalty in a flying city, who's trying to use his political power to help when most of them won't. There's Echo, a jaded emo bird who was trying to fend for herself from a young age in the ruins of a civilization destroyed by the beasts. And then there's Tempest, who, unlike all of them, is just a lizard pirate with a fiery personality, a very angry lizard. The pink stuff coating their body was caused by something related to the beasts that nearly killed them, and has to bear through the serious pain it caused, so it makes sense they'd feel so strongly about them. It's willing to delve into serious themes, arguments, or stuff that's genuinely heartbreaking, while balancing out with fun interactions, which I think helps to make them feel like believable people. While you can get a decent idea of their personality through their designs, they all have a surprising amount of depth, making them interesting, especially near the end, and I'll get to that in a second after a spoiler warning, but there is one more thing I'd like to talk about before we get into major spoilers. You may have noticed I've used them when referring to Skipper, Tempest, and Cinnabar individually, as that's what the game uses, with Tempest being confirmed non-binary and the other two I might be open to interpretation unless I miss something. Beastbreaker has a lot of LGBTQ+ representation, and I mean a lot. I'm very happy to say that it's handled really well. They don't accidentally fall into negative or overused stereotypes, so it feels natural. It's just a neat part of already interesting characters. Like, if you take Jonquil and Poppy together on a mission, Poppy can ask the lover of puns himself what he was like at a young age, saying that he was a handful until, quote, "I relaxed a ton once I ditched the dresses and figured out how I wanted to be addressed," which is the most Jonquil way to reveal that he's trans. While arguably something that doesn't outright improve a story, representation is still important and appreciated despite that when executed well. It helps to normalize things that really should be considered normal in real life. For those who are unaware, it could be a gateway to learning more about these topics, and for those who may hold questionable viewpoints, it can plant a seed of doubt in their minds, which sometimes can blossom into an understanding, or, if anything, a tolerance of others. While it may feel a bit slow to some, I really enjoyed the time Beastbreaker took to develop its large cast of characters to make them all interesting. The final section of the game, where many of the personal side quests reach a satisfying ending, the main story reveals something massive that affects every character, and answers questions that have been lingering since the start, is absolutely stellar. I liked it so much, in fact, that I'm going to delve into major spoilers to talk about the final boss / ending, and attempt to ramble about one of Beastbreaker's themes. I've split this video up into chapters for easier viewing and skipping, so use that or skip to the time on screen if you're interested in playing. Spoiler talk is not something I've done in years, and analyzing the story? Well, until now, definitely not something I've really done to anything that's really complex, as it's way out of my comfort zone. Especially since I tag the developers when I release videos nowadays, so it makes this even more nerve-wracking, but I hope my point makes enough sense because, hey, that's the fun of analyzing stuff, right? Okay, here goes. With the game's length, amount of characters with their personal side quests, and lots of conversations to read, there's a ton of interesting themes and stuff that's explored in the story. I can't go into, like, absolutely everything in detail, as this video's already the longest I've written in years, but there is one thing that ties some of Beastbreaker's most interesting characters together, and a big part of why I really enjoyed the ending. And that one big thing is failure, and, well, we'll just focus on failure for now. From the start, there's Granny. Through Jonquil, you learn she was once a heroic badass who fought beasts and saved lives left and right with her sister, quickly gaining them the title of Legendary Warriors. Their bond was inseparable. Perhaps to a fault. Shackled by grief, she turned her back on the world while the beasts ravaged through villages, and even lost her husband and children due to the beasts, with Skipper and Poppy being the last family members left. She felt like she failed the person closest to her personally, and that deeply affected her. Granny, or rather Thistle, has been through a lot, now terrified of losing a loved one again, causing her and the grandkids to barely leave the farm, and goes too far in trying to stop what went on with her sister from ever happening again. Poppy has seemingly had responsibilities thrown at her by Thistle. Of course, she wants Poppy to improve, as any good parental figure would want, but she's unwilling to compromise or listen to how she feels, only because Poppy's reckless personality reminds Thistle of her similarly carefree sister, whose attitude, eventually caught up with her. Thistle regrets letting her sister be like that and views Poppy as an opportunity for her to make up for her quote-unquote mistake. This behavior causes conflict between them, and it's not until Poppy runs away from home into dangerous territory that she realizes that maybe that's why she's so harsh towards her. As for Skipper, they're clearly brave, but very quiet in social situations, but their adventure helps them to become more talkative, especially later on. They're more obedient, sure, but that means they haven't left the farm much, and maybe that's why only Skipper's so quiet and has difficulty talking. Jonquil calls Thistle out for the way she's treated Poppy with, quote, "There's more than one way to lose someone." They don't see eye to eye on, like, anything. How can Poppy or even Skipper grow as people if they were never given the chance to go out into the world despite the danger? Thistle's mistake was how she reacted to a massive loss in her life in a way that negatively affected her and the loved ones she thought she was protecting. Thistle reacted badly to a failure, but what about someone who failed to react in time to failure? That would be Umbra. By not taking action and ignoring consequences, he was partly responsible for the creation of the beasts and the basically apocalyptic state of the world. He used to be part of the Queen's top team of scientists and technicians in the capital city that put their big brains together to improve the lives of everyone, with batteries being the notable invention. This led to the creation of modern technology in the world, which you see bits of in the story. Batteries are made from sparks, a naturally occurring source of energy or magic, which was once plentiful in the world, but you've only seen it drop from beasts. Pipes were made to forcibly take sparks from the environment to keep up with the demand for new technology and possibilities, but draining the land too quickly caused once lush lands to turn into dreary deserts, and the large amount of sparks in some areas caused them to combine to create the beasts and corrupt the landscape. The fact that technology led to the creation of the beast is foreshadowed pretty well. You can piece together that they're not natural and are some artificial, twisted resemblance of nature at first. I mean, they're very out of place, yet vaguely resemble animals. When spotted, more artificial sounding instruments are added into the song, and sparks drop when you destroy their cores. Sparks, electricity, you put them together. How the fuck did I not figure that out until this point? Despite being aware of the increasing problems, the team's fears were completely dismissed by the Queen, and their short-sighted plan to produce more tech to keep up with demands, even though their methods were slowly but surely causing catastrophic damage to the world, caused everything to spiral towards disaster. Oh my god, doesn't that sound familiar? Fuck. Unable to ignore the risks, Umbra eventually took action and spoke up, but was ignored. He stayed, whilst everyone moved to the new capital city in the sky to continue their work. Umbra created a plan to lure the most dangerous beasts to him and basically blow them up, and more than likely himself, whilst they're all in one place, so he can destroy some technology that the beasts are feeding off of. He accepted that this would end his life as he said his final goodbyes to his spouse, who obviously disagreed with this oddly dangerous plan. They couldn't convince Umbra to reconsider his plan, so they left to find someone who could by exploring and sending messages on behalf of villages in need of help. What about someone who didn't react at all? That would be the Queen. I mean, she was aware of the serious risks from Umbra's research and completely ignored them, moved everyone to a flying city away from the dangerous beasts of the ground, became nearly impossible to contact, and, well, seemed to do absolutely nothing to help despite having the power to do so. It's hard to deny that these characters have been through massive failures, but something that is emphasized a lot in the second half of the story, and personally what I think makes some of the characters really interesting, is the importance of moving on. Umbra's oddly reckless plan is stopped by Skipper and Umbra's spouse Cinnabar. This was their motivation for sending messages and getting Skipper to fight the whole time. Umbra joins as the final companion and reveals his past to everyone, and they're all understandably frustrated and upset to hear that the main thing that fucked all of their lives up was entirely preventable if the Queen listened or if Umbra's team took action. While some characters are unable to really forgive him for his actions, everyone at least appreciates that Umbra is now doing what he can to fix the mess he had a large part in creating. He obviously feels extremely guilty for what he did and, well, doesn't value his own life much since he's very willing to sacrifice himself and he recklessly lets a beast target him instead of Skipper when first met. Through his sympathetic talks with Thistle, spending time with his love, and taking on Akmilla under his wing as a student to prevent future generations from making the same mistake, Umbra slowly but surely starts to overcome that guilt. The new plan is to use the tech that Umbra was going to destroy to send footage of Skipper taking down a powerful beast directly to the Queen to finally get a response. And it works. They're all invited to the Flying City as the Queen has a large-scale solution for the beasts. Great! Turns out there's an extremely powerful one rampaging through the city, so everyone has to take it down. Before leaving, you speak to every companion to make sure they're ready, and then depart with every companion at once for the final boss. It's here where Beastbreaker, for no fucking reason, just gets really good. Man, I love this final boss so fucking much. It's 4 back-to-back fights. I'll test you on how well you can deal with the different types of enemies you fought on your journey. Each fight has you teaming up with different companions, so everyone has their time to shine. You really feel how far Skipper and all have come in both story, as everyone has developed since you first met them, and gameplay, as the upgraded abilities are all stupidly helpful. And the music, oh my fucking god, the music, it's so good. It incorporates Skipper's theme, which is also the title theme of the final boss. That's a really, really cool thing. And the music smoothly changes between fights, and wow, oh my god, everything comes together so well for this final boss. Well, if we look past the part where it crashed every time I stunned it because it would charge an attack or something, then try to release it, I fell for it like 3 times and just made sure not to stun. I'm not gonna bash it for that. It's got a nice autosave system, so I wouldn't like lose much progress, and I didn't run into any other major bugs. After those challenging fights, everyone has something to say to the Queen, but she only cares about hearing what Skipper has to say. Her large-scale solution for the beasts is to create more beasts to combat them, as the final boss you just fought was one she created. She wants Skipper to be on standby in case their beasts go out of control, like what just happened. Skipper, for the first time, speaks up and just shouts back at the Queen. Her plan won't help at all, it would just make everything worse since we know what creates the beast. She has the power to prevent this all from happening, and yet does absolutely nothing. Unlike Umbra, she doesn't want to change or stop what she's doing, even though she has to know it's just going to worsen the situation for everyone, except for maybe her and everyone in the city. Skipper accuses the Queen of not caring about the people she's ruling over because, yeah, she clearly fucking doesn't, and despite everything Skipper has done, they're unable to convince the Queen and is forced to leave. The Queen in this whole scene is super interesting because, well, they're the only one who hasn't changed since the beast ruined the world. She's completely blind to her failure and refuses to accept anyone who says otherwise. An example of someone who has refused to change or move on after failure. At the end, Skipper goes through failure as well. They get home and hide in the basement. Oh, just like at the beginning of the game. Ooh, rising to turn their back on the world, blaming themselves for being unable to convince the Queen to use her position of power to stop the beasts. An almost identical reaction to failure as Thistle, who goes down to speak to them. Thistle understandably hasn't fully moved on from what happened, but she is doing far better than she was at the start. She's slowly opening back up to the world, and her biggest step forward is here, where she uses her experience to relate to Skipper's feelings to help them move on from their screw-up. Thistle tells them to go upstairs to speak to everyone once they're ready. Skipper talks to everyone to see what they're going to do after they couldn't convince the Queen, and this section is just really heartwarming, especially after doing all of the side quests. Everyone's been through their character arcs already, but seeing how they are after they've developed is adorable. Like, Poppy finally gets to explore the world with Akimilla with a goal and is coping with her responsibilities well, which also shows how Thistle has improved too. Tempest and Mallow are gonna round up people to protest against the Queen. God, I love the interactions between these two characters so much, it's gold, but I didn't talk about it that much in this video. And Umbra views saving settlements from the beast not as a reminder of his failure, but as a new beginning towards a better future. All concluded with a monologue from Skipper where they say they're going to accept and move on from their failure. Maybe they weren't able to fix everything at once by convincing the Queen, but they can keep trying again or finding other ways. Until then, they'll just do their bit to help the world by saving settlements one at a time. And the credits just drop. Throughout the story, you've seen how characters have failed and how they've reacted in various unhealthy ways, so to slowly see most of them at least start to move on from the past is satisfying. Having the game's antagonist, I guess, at the end be someone who hasn't even accepted that they fucked up and refuses to do anything about it, unlike the others, makes the confrontation between the Queen and Skipper so engaging. Having Skipper fail at the end, but move on healthily through the help of those who didn't at first, is really cool, and probably why I found the ending overall to be really satisfying, despite it being quite a surprise as well. Overall, I was really shocked by how much I enjoyed the story, even if the pacing is, I guess, maybe a bit off. These characters feel very human despite, not being human, they're all mice and hedgehogs and stuff, and the world is pretty cool. There's lots of interesting stuff to get into, from the beasts and everything about their creation being a metaphor for climate change in real life, and people in positions of power being unwilling to change or help the people they're meant to with how the Queen acts, all the way to less serious stuff like the adorable relationships that start to form between some characters. Hopefully somebody else in the future could maybe go into that stuff, because I don't believe I have the skills to talk about that in an interesting way, other than saying that, well, it's there. Okay, that is everything I wanted to cover for spoilers, and thank you for listening to this very rambly part of an already pretty long video. I get really anxious whenever a video gets over like 15 minutes, as I'm always unsure about the quality of a script until everything is finished and put together, no matter how much proofreading, double checking, or tweaks and all that stuff I make to the script, so honestly this video is terrifying for me to release. I hope I made at least a bit of sense. Beastbreaker is available on Switch and on PC on the Epic Games launcher. Right, okay, shut up, I know, the launcher is ass, everyone uses it to play fucking Fortnite, Fall Guys, or free games, but look, if someone spends years making a game and pouring their heart and soul into it, I'm sure they don't exclusively release on the Epic Games launcher and cut off a large portion of their potential audience unless there is a really good reason for it. I get that it's kind of annoying, but look, indie development is real fucking expensive, risky, and complicated, so the deal, from at least what I've heard, is a really safe way to fund a game and make sure it does alright to keep studios afloat. It's taken me this long to explain why Beastbreaker is fantastic, because you can't really just show someone the footage and they'll get it. Imagine trying to explain it to publishers or convince people on Kickstarter to get funding. How do you advertise a game like this? Seriously. There's plans to release on Steam at some point, so if all that bothers you, I understand, so you should follow Vodeo's social media, which will be in the description, so you can try it out if or when that happens. Vodeo Games' first title has no right to be as good as it is. I mean, personally, I loved it. It's probably not for everyone, as it's an odd game for sure, and a total pain in the ass to explain. I mean, look at the credits, they know too! Nodded politely as we try to explain a game about a bouncing mouse. Yeah, this was the hardest video I've ever written, but I'm more than happy to have done so, as I think Beastbreaker hasn't got the recognition I think it more than deserves for how interesting it is. There's fucking barely anyone talking about it, and like no really in-depth videos covering it, and I really wanted to change that. I mean, Vodeo has literally made video game history by creating the first North American video game related union. That's fucking massive and amazing news, because the industry really needs it with how many people are treated terribly, and for an indie company to pull that off, fuck, I really respect that. I wish the best for Vodeo, and if Beastbreaker's Steam release or the future games do well, I'll have a big old grin on my face. I should clarify that the script was mostly complete in August, as, well, in September I'm set to announce that Vodeo Games had shut down due to being unable to secure funding for their next project, which is a thing that happens in the indie game space with smaller teams and projects and stuff, and I am really sad to see that, as, well, look at this video, look at everything I've gone on about it, and I really wanted to see where it would go, but the team is, like, most of them are looking for full-time work, so if you are, you know, looking for people for your game development studio, here's a list of people I can find on screen right now. In the description should be some links that should help you find ways to contact them. I really liked it. If you've sat through this and listened to me talk about their game for ages, then hey, maybe hire them for something, right? Apologies for how long it's taken to start making videos again, especially because I had a key for this last year. I'm very sorry. I've had a lot going on personally, and I wanted to use my uni holiday to relax, process, and sort some things out. Nothing to be worried about. I'm doing completely fine, and I've managed to get some life-changing help while I've been quiet online. I will probably be giving the channel a visual overhaul for the next video, as I'm turning this point onwards as a sort of restart for a ton of reasons. There's a bit more in the description. I might make a little update video going into some changes. This video was very experimental. I mean, all of my videos are me experimenting with at least something behind the scenes, but this one especially, and it was probably quite long and dry, but I learned a lot about how to do this type of stuff, so any other heavier analysis or rambles should be easier to do than this was and lead to a more watchable video. The next one's going to be something I've really wanted to make for a long time, something of a palate cleanser so I can make something more silly and casual, which I haven't done in a long time, while still talking about why a game's interesting. It was meant to be an April Fool's video. It's not April, I can tell you that for much. And thank you so much for watching this far, and look forward to seeing more stuff from me every once in a while.